it'll be fun. Let's just work through a sparring progression, but let's go really, really slow. Because this is the interesting thing for me, right? If we slow everything down, then there's far more chance of you developing the skills that you need. And most times what people want to do is when they spar, they want to go too fast. So I literally want to see you slow down, as slow as you can go, and just really focus on the key elements, right? So what we'll do is I'll just demonstrate on Vince, and then I'm going to break it down and go through the key aspects, and then we'll just build off that, right? So we'll start from the outside first, right? You should know what I mean by that. Working off the rim at a distance, okay? So if myself and Vince are sparring at that distance, what you should be seeing more than anything else is you want to make sure that there's a hunchback position, right? That I'm working those long range punches. Long range punches include the loose hooks, loose uppercuts, jab to the body, cross to the body. You can do an overhand as well, right? Making sure that you're working with defense, so there must be defense in there, right? And if you're holding the rim, that means you're just out of range. So there should be times when you're working your punches that you're taking that step forward, right? So then if myself and Vince are playing the game, and I say let's go slow, we really want to go slow half speed, right? So we'll be just sparring, but real slowly. So if any time one of us makes a mistake, and I make a mistake and I walk into a punch, no big deal. Okay, let's start there, and then we'll build on there. Okay, right, let's go. Things down, right? When you slow everything down, then you become very aware of your mistakes. Because you can't hide behind things. You can't hide behind, say, speed or strength. So if you make a mistake, you're going to know about it straight away. Okay? So what I want to do first is I want to just build a conceptual framework. It's a big kind of overarching ideas. And then once I see that you've got that, then we'll build into some of the technique. Okay? So first thing I want to see you do is this. You go back, you spar exactly like you just done, nice and light. But I want you to focus on this. The focus is, I want to make sure that I'm in my hunchback stance. Alright? If I'm executing the techniques, I want to stay in it. Okay? Because what I've noticed is, a lot of times, what you tend to do is you tend to come out. But where you mostly will come out, where most people make a mistake, is when they're leaving the scene. When you're actually moving yourself out, that's where you tend to come out. Okay? There's a couple of problems with that, right? If I stand up like this, obviously I become more open, more susceptible to being hit. Right? My defense gets weak. It's hard for me to react if I have to put in some power shots if we were going hard. So I want to stay in this compact base all the time. So when he's throwing those punches at me, staying compact, when I'm moving and I leave the scene, I stay in that position. I don't come out. Plus staying down there all the time allows me that if any time he decides he wants to change levels and put me on the ground, I'm in a position that I can stop it. It's very difficult to stop a takedown if you're standing upright. So you want to be in this position all the time. Plus you're closing down all the lines, which is important. Okay, so let's do that first. Stop. I mean, some people, that's how they teach, that's how they train. Very kind of like open style boxing. You know, this very kind of, you can call it attribute-based boxing, where there's a lot of timing that's required to, you know, move out of the way of punches. Okay, that's fine, but the problem with that is that you're leaving a lot of things open. I just think in my mind, it's the safer you are, the better. The less openings there are, the better you are, right? And plus, if you standing in front of somebody and they're throwing really hard shots at you, you're able to ride that storm and it's not freaking you out, then your confidence goes up. If you're over here and suddenly you get tagged with shots and you don't know how to respond, you're just going to get yourself more and more into a kind of a vortex and get yourself into trouble, right? Typically what you find is that if somebody starts off like this and then they start getting hit, then they want to start doing this, you know, they want to turn their back away. At least when you enter the fight with the premise of keeping everything nice and tight, you're able to ride that. Right? Literally, you should just feel totally confident and relaxed there, so it doesn't matter what's coming in. Then, for you to put in your counter shots becomes easy. Okay? So taking that same idea, you're going to add two more things in, because what we're doing right now is we're playing, right? This is a sparring match. It's a little bit different if this was self-preservation. Now, typically in self-preservation, if you start throwing punches, every single punch will be as hard as the last. But when you're sparring, let's say we're going to do 6 rounds, for example, right? It's a game. And so what you try to do is you try to set up your moves. You try to build into the framework that there's opportunities for you to score in openings, okay? So you can't just come out and just go crazy. You could, but what happens if it doesn't work and now you gash yourself and you know that you've still got 5 rounds to go, okay? So what I want to do now is keep in the hunchback position, keep nice and tight, but I want to see you testing for the rim. Right? Where I'm just sticking my hand out. One, I'm doing that for a couple of reasons. One, to gauge distance. 2, to see what his response is, right? How does he respond to that punch? What kind of defense does he have? Just because he's working the CM defense doesn't mean everybody would, right? Some people might do what? They might try to slip, they might block with their hands, okay? That will kind of start defining what you want to do next, okay? Plus, when you're testing, when you're putting your hand out all the time, you try to test that range, you're also making him think about when is the attack going to come. So you're putting him on the defensive a bit, right? If I just stand like this, and the only time I hit him is when I step forward, what's going to happen? It's going to take 30 seconds or so, and it's going to be unconscious, but he's going to start picking up on what? Every time this guy hits me, he steps forward, right? Then you start putting in a countermeasure. So what you want to do is you want to try to hide that. You want to be unpredictable. So even when I put my jab out, it's never done at the same rhythm. So I'm not doing this. Okay? I mix it up. Sometimes I'll go fast. Maybe next time I'll go slow. You know, maybe I'll go fast, then slow. Play around with it. Okay? So I'm adding that in. Then off that, when you feel ready, you can step in and throw your combination. When you leave now, I want you to put in a safety jab to get back out. So as a general rule, not only do you want to stay down when you back out, right, you want to stay in your structure, you also don't want to just leave doing nothing. Because typically what people will do is if you step in and offload and he kind of rides the storm so nothing gets in, as soon as I leave, he's coming in. So that's why I'm also telling you to stay down. Because if you leave the scene with your head up, that's probably the best time that this person's going to catch you. Alright? So you want to not only when you leave the scene stay down, but you also want to put in the safety jab until you're back to the rim. When you do the safety jab, this is the hard part, you want to be careful that every time you exit the scene that you don't always go to the same direction. Because the same thing's going to happen again. A couple of seconds in, most of it's unconscious, he's going to realize you always go to the right-hand side. So then he starts trying to lock down. So what does that tell you? If you leave, sometimes you leave to the left, sometimes you leave to the right, sometimes you leave pretending to go to the left, but actually you want to go to the right. Does that make sense? So when you bring it all together and you slow it down, because you have to slow it down, there's a lot of things going on, you've got both myself and Vince testing. He's also testing. See where that range is. This is what happens. Then I'm going to step in, and then when I leave, I safety jab, because he wants to come in. And the safety jab is going to hold him out. Same thing would apply if he was the person that engaged, and he steps in, he's going to do a safety jab to get back out of here. So it puts me on the defensive. So we've got this game going. Make sense? Okay, right, let's put that in. Does that make sense? Better? You know what I'm covering with you now is what I call it core foundational material. It's actually what a lot of people forget. They go in and they spar, they forget about this stuff, they don't work it as much as they should. You know, a lot of times there's always in martial arts, people want fancy stuff. But I don't believe that there's such a thing as an advanced technique. For me, an advanced technique is, if you want to call it the foundation, what a lot of people call basics. I hate the word basics, because basics implies there has to be something better. So I'd rather prefer calling it core foundation, because I'd say that done at a higher level is your advanced techniques. And so really, there's no difference between myself and you when we spar. I'm going to use the exact same stuff I just showed you, except I'm doing it at a higher level, because I spend more time focusing on it. And so when you come into sparring though, you don't want to just leave sparring to chance, especially when you're trying to train this. You should come in with the mindset of trying to remember to do this stuff. What will happen over time is it'll go into the background and you won't have to remember it anymore. But in the beginning you're going to. The problem is when you're remembering something, you then stutter the move. Do you understand what I mean by stutter the move? It's not as clean and as fluid as it should be, because you're trying to think it through. So because that happens, why do you think then it's a good idea to slow things down? See, because if you slow things down, then there's less chance of you worrying about your ego getting bruised or getting hurt, or, you know, those kind of things kind of fade away, and that's okay. Then you can take the risk. If I say, hey, listen, let's go full out, but I want you to play with this stuff and I want you to develop it, you're not going to. You're going to go back to whatever you think works for you, and that may not be the best solution. Make sense? Okay. All right. So adding into this a little bit, it's a high level of foundational material, and it's kind of what most people don't do, but you want to do, and it makes all the difference. So what people tend to do, if we're playing the game that we just did now, right, I'm doing a test, right, I'm stepping in, I'm throwing a combination, and I exit with the safety. What most people tend to do with their rear hand, right, because you'll notice that when you're doing this kind of stuff, a lot of times, a lot of the defense is reliant on the rear hand, okay? You actually feel that a lot of the shots are landing on your rear hand. You notice that? Okay, but what a lot of people do is they keep this hand completely still. So for example, when the person's exiting, like this is I'm exiting, they keep this hand still, and what tends to happen when you keep this hand still, if he throws a shot on your glove, right, a lot of times it lifts it like this, and you end up doing this where you lift your head, okay, or you get caught completely underweight. So what you actually want to try to build into this, and this is really hard for a lot of people, but you actually want to have get to the point where your hands are never still. So your hands should always be in a position or prepared to move, okay? So even though that I'm working a jab and I'm exiting, and he starts throwing punches, this hand needs to be moving all the time. Not just a stationary hand that doesn't do anything. Same thing applies when I'm stepping in on the jab. When I'm stepping in on the jab and he's throwing punches back at me, you'll notice that my hands are always ready to move. Okay, so it's not this way I stick my hand out, but this hand doesn't move. And now he throws shots at me, then that's why you get hammered. So you need to be prepared to move your hands all the time. The best way to drill this, okay, it's kind of interesting, but it's the best way that I know how to do it, is to give Vince something to do, and he has to kind of just switch off to what I'm doing. So if I say to him, I just want him just to throw punches. No break, just throw light punches at me all the time. Okay, so there's no break in those punches. So he's not trying to get anything out of it, he's just throwing punches, right? He's going to switch off to me, and he's just going to throw punches. When he's just throwing punches at me, it forces me now to keep my hands moving. So not only do I have to be getting back at him, and I don't have to score right now. I just have to be able to put my hand in and keep this hand moving. So there's never this time where this hand is stuck and it doesn't move. If you can get that right, that will just like jump your game big time. Because it's probably one of the biggest errors I see. Make sense? Okay, so one side's just throwing, real light. Other side, you're just focusing on getting this thing moving. Don't even worry about hitting back with this hand right now. Just defending and having this move while you're punching whenever you need to. Make sense? Okay, let's try and do that. Let's go. Okay, so, but it's a little bit unrealistic, right? You wouldn't be doing it like that for so long. It's a drill. It's kind of just to set in your mind what you need to do. Okay, so and to this point, let me talk about this because it's kind of where we're going to move into. We're going to build off this. A lot of people misunderstand the position that I have, and if you've heard it before, if you haven't, then fine, I'll just go over it. But I normally talk about what I say, let's try and approach training without attributes, right? And then people misunderstand that because the attitude is, but if you've got attributes, you should use it. It depends really, right? It depends on where your level of confidence is in your game. Okay, if you've been training for a certain amount of time, and you've developed good skill in movement, right? You have this down, you're confident, you've done thousands of rounds of sparring, then of course, what's going to happen? You're going to have some real skill to bring to the sparring rounds, okay? Then if you have attributes, use them, naturally, right? If I've got speed, power, great timing, I'm going to use it. But when I say, let's build a game not of attributes, typically when I'm talking about that, I'm saying, when somebody comes in on day one, and they've never trained in their entire life before, they've never been punched in the face, ever, right? And you can't now expect that person to bring attributes to bear. What attributes? They likely don't even have, right? Probably what's going to happen is, and some of you are still there, where you're mainly worried about getting hit in the face and you're trying to avoid that. So you start doing this, kind of like, closing your eyes, flinching a little bit, all these kinds of things. Well, no amount of attributes are going to help you until you clear that up, until you get some game and you develop some skill. Then, once you're at that stage, sure, now listen, if you've got the attributes, use it. Does that make sense? So when I'm talking about a non-attribute based game, I'm talking specifically about people who come in and have never trained before. So it doesn't make sense to me, if you've never ever had to deal with somebody punching you in the face, why would I want to start from here? This kind of stuff, slipping and bobbing and weaving punches, which takes an enormous amount of timing to pull off, right? The attributes you need there are much higher than you would need for this. This is lower attributes compared to this. That doesn't mean to say that, so then people say, but how come I see, for example, if I watch boxing, whatever, I see boxers doing this all the time. Okay, fair enough. But you're not taking a lot of things into account. You're not taking into account that, let's say this person's a professional. Let's say they train 5 to 6 hours a day. They've been training for the last 2 decades. Let's put all of these things into perspective. I can also spar like this. I come from a boxing background. But what do I have that you don't have? You have to look at it like that, right? If you've only been training 6 months, a year, even 2 years, and you're only coming in twice a week, and your training is 45 minutes, man, what you do in 2 years, this guy probably does in a couple of months. You've got to be realistic, right? So if you're coming in with that, this is not the best way to start. You start here, you get really good at this, then of course, if you want to branch out, and you want to play with some of this stuff, there's nothing that says you can't do that. But you must have game in order to play it. That's the number one thing. And you can only build that game, I think, through a core foundational process where you're not taking unnecessary risks. Because obviously, if you come in like this, and you get jacked up the first night, and you get really hammered, maybe you've got a massive headache, worst case, something gets broken in the process, not uncommon for that to happen, you're likely never going to come back. Well, I wouldn't, right? Okay? So it's progressive. Okay. So with that in mind, what I'm trying to say now is that once you get this idea, we can start building in some of those attributes. So we can start building in more of the counter-striking game, right? And what does it actually mean to counter-strike? Counter-striking is not this. If he throws a punch at me, and then he takes it back, and then I return the punch, that's not countering. Okay? That's what I would call a renewed attack. Meaning that he fired an attack at me, he took it back, and I renewed with my own. Okay? A counter-strike means that while he's hitting me, I'm hitting him. So what the drill that we just did is kind of like the starting stages of that. Alright? Because what were you doing? You were defending and hitting while he was hitting you. So we do the exact same drill where Vince basically switches off to what I'm doing. He just throws punches out. The difference is this time, I'm going to be here while he's just hitting, and I'm going to move around and see where there's an opportunity for me to counter. And you'll notice that I'm not waiting for him to stop. I'm not waiting for him to go back to defensive posture and then trying to hit him. I'm actually hitting him while he's hitting me. But in order for me to do that, I have to be able to move my hands. Because if I go in like this, like really rigid and hard and kind of stiff, and he's just throwing punches at me, every time I do this, I'm going to get hit on the second one. I'm never going to be able to evade that second punch. So now, of course, while I'm here, I can, if I want to, start moving my body. So I can move it side to side, which we call a slip. Okay, it's a modified slip. I'm not going too low, because unlike boxing, right, we have to worry about somebody kneeing you in the face, right, throwing elbows, throwing kicks, taking you down. These things we have to consider. So you can't do this. Probably not a good idea in our game. Okay, but you can move side to side, so that'll let it move past you. You can drop to go underneath it, so like a modified duck, those work really well. Okay, so while you're doing all of this, you can just add that in, which obviously gives you different angles that you can work against. You come back and do counter shots, got it? So he's just going to be an autopilot, and you're going to do that next. Okay, right, let's go. Punches, I'm riding the storm, I'm looking for those opportunities to put in my counter shots. Okay, one thing I just want to point out is, because once you start slipping, what tends to happen when you're doing these kind of motions, these lateral motions, there's a tendency to stay out there too long. Like you stay there for a little bit longer than you need to. And then what ends up happening is, let's say he throws across at me, and I'm over here. Then what people tend to do is they start like punching out of this, and they're doing like weird stuff. It's not really going to be effective. So the one thing you want to set in your head is that when you're here, and you're moving around, and you're working your counter shots, and let's say you're out here, you're always coming back and resetting. Always resetting back to square hits. So if you find yourself out here, like you're out here for a little bit too long, rather get back and reset. Because just think about that as that it's a really unbalanced position. If Vince is out there, he's hanging out there, right, this is not good for him. Especially if I'm square to him, who's going to be able to hit harder here? I mean, he might be able to fly swat me from here. He might do like a bowler hook, like swing with his left hand. Okay, that kind of thing, but I'm going to be in a really strong position. If he bowler hooks me and I come back with a jab, who's going to get there first? Who's going to do the most damage, right? So what I'm saying is, can you hit from there? Sure. Is it structurally sound? No. So I'm all about always keeping structurally sound and making sure I'm always balanced all the time. And of course, there's times when you are out there. But don't hang out there, don't camp out there. Once you're out there, you come back and you reset yourself back to the position as quick as you can. Got it? Okay, alright, put that in. Does that make sense? I mean, I can add more stuff to that, right? So I'll just mention it because I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information. But just as we go into the next part and we start playing other stuff, if you can remember this, just try to apply. One thing you want to be careful of is that when you go like jab to the body or you work across to the body, don't just do that on its own. Don't just do that one technique and then back out. So as a general rule, the way that I always kind of talk to my own clients and say this is the stuff you need to focus on. Anytime you go to the body, you always come back to the head. It doesn't have to be how I just did it. It could have been with the same hand. You could have gone jab to the body, come back with a jab to the head. You could have gone jab to the body, come back with a cross to the head. You could have gone cross to the body, come back to the head. But each time you want to come back to the head. Sometimes that might be different. When I say come back to the head, right now I'm doing straight punches. But maybe if I was a little bit closer to Vince, I might have now, instead of coming back with a jab to the head, I might have gone uppercut to the head or a hook to the head. But the principle's the same thing. So just remember that. Second thing as well is that when you're out here and you're throwing, say for example, those loose hooks or the loose uppercuts, same thing applies. Don't just throw those things on their own and leave them. Don't go, you're moving here, you counter nicely, throw an uppercut and stop. Right? Because what tends to happen is anytime you work the circular shots without even you realizing it, when you work these shots, you open. And a lot of times people stay open just that little bit too long. And if he's firing the straight shots, you get caught. That's why most people don't like to throw loose hooks and loose uppercuts because they feel vulnerable. Okay? The way to get around the vulnerability is that once you fire that uppercut, you come back with a straight shot if you can. If you fire that hook, you come back with a straight shot. And it would be the same way the other way around. If I went hook, come back with a straight shot. If I go uppercut, come back with a straight shot. Just what does that do? Immediately puts him on the defensive. He has something else to deal with. If you just do this, and you do nothing else, you can see there's a bit of time there, a lot of time in boxing, right? Because like a microsecond in boxing can be a lifetime, right? Somebody can hit you at least 3 times before you even get your hand back, if they're really quick. So in that sense, if you go hook, you want to come back. Make sense? Okay. Now, don't know if you noticed this, but it started happening, and it happens again. A lot of this stuff happens unconsciously because the other side just adapts. So if I was the person just throwing the punches, and Vince was doing what we did before. He's trying to, basically just work his counter strikes. So let's say he's working his counter strikes. And actually what this side starts doing, I don't know if you notice it, you start holding yourself back a little bit. You start pushing a little bit back. You notice that? I notice you guys are doing it, right? Okay, and the reason you do that is because instinctively you don't want to get hit. Even though you know it's a drill, your body's always in a defensive position, right? It's always thinking survival. So it's going, shit, I don't want to stand here. This guy's moving around like this now, getting all these counter shots in. So naturally what I want to do is I want to start holding this guy back. I want to put some pressure on him to keep him out. So what you would have found is, the minute the person did that, everything I showed you just got a little bit harder to do. Even though you were working great defense, maybe you were testing with the jab, maybe you were moving out trying to get in those counter shots, it got a little bit harder. And so then you can understand why the CM2 hand defense came into play. Where did that come from? The CM2 hand defense came from that, where somebody picks up on what you're doing and they start holding it up. Because if I'm just working CM1 and he's throwing straight shots at me and he just backs up a little bit, what he's going to be able to do is just basically hold me out there. Especially if he's a big, strong guy, he'll just go boom, hold you out. And so, yes, maybe you're defending the shot, but it's like you're walking into a brick wall. So now you have to have a different kind of attitude and way you're going to adapt to it to get past those shots. That's where the CM2 hand defense. So what I want to see you do again is some of the drill. He's just going to fire punches, right? He's going to just kind of switch off to what I'm doing. He'll likely anyway do that now to hold me out. So I'm going to be working my CM1, and I want to just see you lock into that CM2 motion and then back out. But he already made a mistake there. He starts trying to predict where I'm going and not just throw punches, right? So the idea is that he mustn't think about what I'm doing, okay? He must just fire his shots. I mean, look, past my shoulder works, so look up to the ceiling over there. Look past me, okay? So he just fires a shot just so that I can work against the resisting opponent and then lock into CM2 and then back out again. And when I lock into CM2, my motions are real small and tight. You're always imagining there's a U and you're working on the U. But it's small, it's not this. I've already said why that's a bad idea. You don't want to, if somebody's throwing these bombs at you and you're trying to get past these, go like this and hold yourself out there. Because when the next shots come in, not only you're out of balance, but you're going to get a lot of pressure on you. So you want to make sure that once you move in, small movements. So it's like a U action, but defense. Can you see how those previous drills come in where I said get used to always moving your hands? Because most people can do this. This is not hard to do. But to do this and move your hands and your feet is where the problem comes in. Okay, got it? Okay, just add that in. Okay, so this to me is really important. This is my structure. This is the way that I'm standing, okay? I'm never a fan of people switching up stances. Okay, so what you tend to find a lot of times in some martial arts systems, they'll do this thing where they're like switching up their feet. Do that. The problem with that is that when you're here, right, and you're fighting against somebody, you start developing game. If you keep switching up your feet, you confuse yourself. Because not only that, actually strategy will change too. Right? If I'm standing like this in front of it, because the way we stand now, we're not in matched leads, right? It's not like I'm looking in a mirror right now. So this is an unmatched lead position. Because of the way that we're standing, if I'm here, not a big deal if I drop this lead hand a little bit. I can kind of be a little bit more relaxed. But as soon as I switch up here, not only do I have to occupy the outside, because I don't want to be here, because then he has square hips and I don't. So I want to always be fighting for here. But I also want to raise my hand up higher, because I have to now worry about the jab, which typically most people's jabs are really fast. This is his fast hand. I don't want to be here right now. That'll get me into trouble. So this comes up, where here, I don't need to worry too much about it. See what I'm saying? So unless you are freaking super on track and you know exactly how to switch your stuff in a minute's notice, it's never a good idea. There's also this kind of misconception that you have to have everything equal. So if I practice 1,000 punches off the jab, then I better make 1,000 crosses, and my jab and my cross should be equal at the same level. I've never seen that, and it doesn't happen. Like it or not, you're going to have some tools on your body that are better than others. You discover that through time, and you start finding the stuff that really works for you. Some people are excellent at the hook, some people suck at it. And it wouldn't matter how much they practice the hook, they still suck at it. So you start developing some stuff that works really well for you. You don't have to have 50 million things. It's better to have 5 things that work really well. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, when I say about structure is, it doesn't serve me any purpose, and it puts me in a danger position. If he throws punches, and I work into my CM2, but in the process of coming in CM2, I compromise my entire structure. I lose it. So now I'm standing like this. Okay, now I'm just an open target. And if I don't fight, who fights out of this? Nobody fights out of this. You're feeling, your body gets used to this. You've actually done yourself a disservice. For you to hit from here, fight from here is almost unheard of. Your body doesn't recognize it. Okay? So what you want to do is you want to make sure that if this is how you're training, when you enter in the same position. When you exit in the same position. You make sure that everything never changes. You want to keep good core structure. Because this is where you develop, putting all your stuff from. This is where you're delivering all your tools. You want to make sure that you stay in this. Because I see some of you do this. You go like this, you move in, and you come out. Completely out of structure. Okay? I hate to tell you as well that this is not a good structure if you're trying to keep a base position. If Vince pulls his feet up like this, pull your feet up like this, he's going to bounce back. It's going to fall over. If he goes into his fighting stance, it's very hard to move it. This is a good firm structure. See how he just bounces back? But he doesn't lose anything. If you're standing like this now, and I hit you, you lose everything. You see what I'm saying? How are you going to respond if that's how you're going to react to somebody pushing in on you? What happens if I decide to take you down? You're in a very vulnerable position already, and now you're going to be even more vulnerable. Do you understand what I'm saying? So you have to get fixated on making sure that structure is key, and make sure that you try to keep it as best as possible. It's hard because what typically will happen is, if I move in on somebody and I don't have a great amount of experience, and suddenly he starts catching me, what my body really wants to do is the last thing I want to do. So what do I mean by that? He'll be throwing punches at me. If I go in and I'm getting caught, my body wants to do this. It wants to leave the scene. It doesn't want to be there. It wants to get away from it because it's trying to protect itself. I have to, in that second, in that moment, override that and say, no, 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 no. Stay, 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 stay. Stay looking at the opponent. Keep your hands moving. Rather than when he's hitting me, going like this, I want to see if I can get back and focus back into my structure. So if I was here for a split second and now getting hit, the quicker I can get back to here, the better it's going to be for me. Otherwise, if I don't get used to that and I get hit, then I'm going to do this. And you can see why that's a bad idea. Okay, you don't turn your back on somebody. Make sense? So when you go back in now, really focus on the structure. Watch your back heel as well. You guys drop, go flat-footed. I mean, again, you'll see in MMA, people fight like this, with their feet flat. I don't understand it. For me, as somebody coming from a boxing background, and I boxed with Willie Tawil, a very famous boxing coach. He would give us hard time if we had our feet flat. Because he'd be like, how are you going to move? How are you going to control the ring? Think about it. It's hard to move. Yes, it does feel like you're more planted. Okay, but your range is out when you do that. If you want to you want to cross the threshold really quickly, it's very hard to do. That's why when you see a lot of MMA people, they suck at boxing. Half the time their punches don't even land. Right? They don't have the right range. When you're up here, this to me makes more sense. This is how I was taught. Never taught to be flat-footed. Because now if I want to change direction, it's easy. Okay? And it's interesting, even the old school Muay Thai teachers taught this way. This is a new thing, this bouncing thing. People like Apidej who passed away and those old timers, if you went and trained with Apidej, he's here. This is how he would fight. On his toes. And shin block from there. Everything came from here. Old school. Right? Because it makes a lot of sense if you're doing that. You can feel the difference between engaging the target quickly and doing this versus this. Two different things. Okay. Right, let's add that in. Let's go. Make sense? Seriously, I mean, if you just took what I've done, like now, and I'm going to add more, but if you just take that as a general game plan, and you just train that and focus on it every time you come into sparring, your game's going to skyrocket, I promise you that. But really you should be aware, because you've slowed things down, which parts are working really well for you and which parts aren't. Which are the parts that you're failing at. So I see like a lot of you, you're still struggling with the idea of keeping your hands moving all the time. So that for some of you, that might be the thing that you need to focus on. Okay? So you need to just be aware while we're doing this, okay, that looks like a problem area for me. This I'm getting down fine, this part I'm struggling with. That kind of gives you an idea of what you need to work on. So when I come out in August, it should be fixed, right? Yes. Yes. Okay. Alright, so let's go back now, because one of the things we want to be careful of as well, it's great doing drills like this where one guy just kind of keeps hitting all the time, so you have an opportunity to do stuff, but it starts creating an unrealistic idea of what it's going to be like. So it's always good to go back to the sparring, kind of make it more free, but for now, like I said, let's keep it slow. There's no reason to go fast, okay? I know it's hard to go slow, okay, because everything in you wants to pick the speed up. Right? But in this way, you can really see what's working well. And if you can make it work at this pace, then going a little bit faster is not a big deal. But if you're going fast and messing up, you're probably not even aware that you're messing up. That's oftentimes what happens. Okay, so this is where you build your awareness of the things you need to work on. Okay, so we go back. Exactly what we did before. All the elements get tied in. I'll talk it through as I'm going, and then I'm still going to add in my CM2. But Vince can do the same thing. Okay, so we touch gloves. Right? I'm testing. Right? He might be doing the same thing. Okay? So I'm testing. I step in with a combination, but I'm just working the CM1 game right now. So you saw, what did I do? I did a safety jab as I went back. I made sure I was in structure. My hands are moving all the time. Maybe next time when I'm coming in here, I'm testing again, and Vince starts throwing punches at me. I work in CM2, but now I want to work my safety jab. So I'm not just going to leave CM2. I'm not going to come in, go CM2, and then leave the scene and do nothing else. I'm going to put my safety jab back in again. Because that's what we've been doing, right? Same thing applies. Why would it be any different? If I'm here and I step in on Vince and I leave the scene and I say that's not a good idea, why would that be any different if I go CM2 and leave the scene and not do anything? Same thing applies, okay? Remember, the person, the best opportunity that he has to hit you is when you're leaving the scene. In the same way that the best opportunity for somebody to hit you is when you've just finished punching. Because it's easier for the other person to time that. Most people will take some amount of time to build their timing, hence the word timing. Okay? It's going to take time, all right? So when you don't have timing, the two places that's easiest for you to kind of key in on somebody is when they are leaving, that's easier for him to hit me, or when I've just finished my punch. So that tells you that straight off the bat, even as a beginner, if you want to call it that, alright, that's the two places you're going to get whacked the most. When you're coming in, alright, and then you leave and do nothing, he's going to chase you, alright, or when you throw a punch in all the way back. That's why when we throw punches, we don't do this. Okay? Alright, obviously, if you've got great attributes and you've built those in, you might be able to do this and then you move already. But if this is like your first few months, how are you going to do that? Right? It's much safer to go get my hand freaking back up. Much easier. Okay, less problems there. Make sense? Okay, so add everything we just did, but into the CM2 as well. Okay, let's go. Any light bulb moments? No? Yes. I think it's already better. I mean, like, there, just like sort of saying right now, like, he kept getting hit all the time because what he would do is he'd come in, he'd throw his punches, but as soon as Vince came back, he wouldn't move his hand. If you don't move this hand and you're not ready to move straight into the defense, just that little bit of time is all he needs to capitalize and hit. As soon as you fix that, it changes the dynamics completely. Okay? Now what I want you to do is I want you to do the exact same thing, Except when you come into CM2 now you want to be hitting out of CM2. Okay, so now typically what's going to happen is, not always, but CM2 works the best as the counter strike. Meaning that what normally will happen is, and we'll try to set it up so that it looks that way, but if he's throwing punches at me, and he keeps throwing punches at me, I'm going to go into CM2, but while he's still throwing punches at me, I'm looking for those opportunities to fire in the shots. That's not always how it happens. Of course, sometimes I'll enter in on somebody and they'll immediately do what? Pull their hands back and go, well, better go defense. Okay? Alright? But if they still have their hands out there, then CM2 is awesome, because what's going to happen is, while your hands are still out there, you're getting hit. And most people don't know how to respond to that. Like, most people don't know how to deal with it. Okay? So you do the exact same thing we did, right? We start building in all the elements. I've got the testing, right? He might be testing too, right? So we're testing. I step in, maybe I just throw just techniques from there because I'm just working the CM1 range. And then suddenly when I feel there's a time, I'm going to go into CM2, work with some counters. Now, if he lifted up like that at that moment in time, I'm going to capitalize with it. What you want to do is, when somebody enters in on you, and again, this is very, very common. What your body wants to do, you have to override. Okay? Because you might think, in your head, you're going, logically this makes sense. Your body feels that this is what it should do, but a lot of times you should be doing the opposite. So it's not uncommon, for example, if I'm throwing punches and he goes in CM2, right, goes CM2, most people want to do this. They want to pull themselves away from that motion coming in. Obviously not a good idea. Okay? If I'm straightening up and he's going CM2 and countering, I'm going to be eating a lot of punches. So actually what I want to do is the opposite. Okay? If I start throwing punches and he goes CM2, I want to go down with him. I'd rather go down and meet him head to head and be in the same level as him, okay, than be out here. And what's very interesting to me, just as a side thought, because it just came up in a conversation recently, I always find that, like, if you look at traditional martial arts, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of not good, a lot of stuff that they teach doesn't work. But every now and again, there's like this thing that pops out and you go, wow, okay, there's an idea there that obviously somebody picked up on somewhere down the line, historically, that was a really good idea. But oftentimes they themselves no longer understand why that is applicable. What do I mean by that? So my son was doing gymnastics, and a little bit later picked him up, and he was watching the karate class afterwards. And the karate sensei kept telling the students to be in the Zenku Tadachi, right? But when they were moving on each other, to make sure that they line themselves up to each other. So what he was trying to say is, don't stand too upright, come down to the person's level. Okay? Probably if you went in there and you said to that sensei, why are you doing that? He probably doesn't really understand the idea. Why is that idea important? Why are you even teaching it? He's teaching towards him. I can throw another example. My boxing coach would often say, parry the punch, parry the punch. And then I asked him, what does he mean by parry the punch? Where does that come from? He didn't know that came from fencing. He didn't know it was a fencing term. But somewhere down historically, because back in the day they used to teach in the same schools that they taught sword fighting, they also taught pugilism. So a lot of the terminology got crossed over. So to parry means to redirect, right? To redirect the punch. That's what basically he was saying. Okay, but he didn't understand it in that way. Same thing with this karate teacher, he doesn't understand. But it's a very, very good concept. Okay? Because what it's telling you is that what you never want to do, when somebody moves in lower than you, the last thing you want to do, if he comes in low, you don't want to come out high. Because if he starts throwing shots from over the top, you're not going to see them. You're going to get tagged. If you're doing this, you've lost a lot of your peripheral vision down here. And so if he starts firing shots, especially if you're throwing punches out and that thing comes over the top, you're not going to know until it meets your face. Right? So then it makes perfect sense that if he comes in low, I go low. I meet him there. Even from a wrestling standpoint, that makes sense. Because the last thing I want to do is, if he goes low, I stand up straight, like in an up straight position. What's going to happen is he'll put me on the ground. I'm not going to be able to stop him. If he changes level, I'm going to change level. Right? You don't see two wrestlers coming like this. Touch hand, he goes low, and the other guy goes high. No, we touch hands and we go, right. That's where we start, right? Because we're meeting each other on the same level, which means it's going to be equal. Alright, I balance it out. This is unbalanced if I straighten myself up. So same thing's going to apply. If I'm here and suddenly Vince locks into CM2, rather lock yourself down, go back to the CM1. But don't pull yourself out and go straight. You're going to get yourself into trouble. So you're going to lock into CM2 now, and now you're going to put in some shots. And then when you leave the scene, you're going to work your safety jab to get back out of it. Make sense? Okay, let's do it. Okay, massive difference. Okay, so the next drill I want to do is just a drill to kind of reinforce movement. Okay, because what tends to happen when people are sparring and it gets a little bit competitive, you know, when you're trying to like score on him and he's trying to score on you, you actually limit your possibilities. You don't play as much as you should. And that's okay. In a real fight, that's kind of where you want to be. You want to, you know, stick to your A game, you want to bring the best tools that you have to bear. But when you're training, that's not the way you want to approach it. And if you only ever train that way, where you're only trying to score and avoid being scored on, actually what starts happening is you deteriorate your game. You don't get that good. Okay, so I'll juxtapose this to say jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu training. It's like going in and you only ever roll to beat the person in front of you. It's about only trying to catch a top position. It's about only trying to get the submission. Nothing wrong with that because there's time and place for that. When, you know, my life's on the line, or I'm in a situation where, you know, often happens, unfortunately, somebody says, hey, let's roll nice and light, and the guy comes out tearing and tries to rip your head off, and you have to now defend yourself, right? And when that happens, okay, you have to bring your A game. But there should be more time spent flowing and playing, because it's in the flow that you understand the possibilities. You're never going to know what your body can actually do and how far you can push it unless you can play. Because when you're not playing, when you're competing, you limit your options. Right? You're not going to take any risk. A risk might mean you get seriously hurt. You're not going to try something out of the box 9 times out of 10, because maybe that might mean that you get your arm broken. So now you're going to just stick to what you know works and will keep you safe. And that's fine, but where is the part where you develop your game? Where you play with all the possibilities. So that when you are in an intense kind of fight, that you might not use all those possibilities, but because you're always playing within the realm of all the potentials, your game is so much more fluid, more focused, you have more confidence. Does that make sense? So what I'm going to show you now, it's kind of a fun drill, but it's hard to do. It's easier to do in jiu-jitsu than it is to do in boxing. Because immediately in boxing, for some reason, ego starts taking hold. Okay? So what you want to do here is you want to understand the game plan, what we're trying to put into play, and you want to try to bring as much of this into the play as you possibly can. The objective is to do what I call flow boxing. Building with flow jits. It's the same idea. The idea is that I want to be hitting all the time, but Vince wants to be hitting all the time. But the only way that we can do that is we need to know that at no time in that drill is he going to get hurt. And so I have to go light. I also have to make sure that I'm not closing my fists, I'm not trying to crunch in, and we just play. And the idea is to see what comes out, and to play all the possibilities, and to have fun with it. Okay? So you come in, you touch gloves, and you don't stop. You just keep playing, right? So you spar, and he's going to be doing all the time. And I just move. But nice and slow like this. Move around, see how I can move my body, right? See where I can match. Okay. You are going to get hit. There is no way you're not going to get hit. This is the thing with the stroke. You will get hit. Best way to avoid it, of course, is to keep your chin down. Right? Most of you you'll find that the shots will land on the top of your head. But if he's doing it the way that he should be doing it, it should just be like little light, little taps. Okay, but what I want to see is I want to see you stretch yourself. So rather what I'm trying to get you away from is this kind of thing, where you touch gloves and you like this. You know? That's when you like, oh shit, you're worried about getting hurt. That's why you're sparring like that, right? But you're not learning anything. Okay? This is when you learn. When you touch gloves and you just play, and you're willing to take a risk and make a mistake and maybe get caught with something. Okay? And then just you know that you can just come back into it. But it also means that you can shift your angles, you can play around, you can force him to move. Just play. Right, let me see you do that. Let's go. And we're going to switch partners on this one. Okay, ready to go.
Moving your hands, moving your hands. Still got to keep good game plan, nice and tight, keep moving all the time. You're going to get tagged, and that's fine. But now you can afford to get tagged. It doesn't really matter. You can keep going, you can adjust, you can fix the mistakes. When there's a mistake, just fix it straight away. Keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. Alright, switch